in biosecurity actually. I was there working for Biosecurity Queensland since the mid-1995 to early 2000s, and I was actually there the day that they actually found or detected fire ants. Henry Palaszczuk was my minister. I worked throughout Queensland for Department of Natural Resources, that's what it was called before Biosecurity Queensland. Done a lot of eradication programs for government, a lot of management programs for weeds, different feral pests, and worked in New South Wales. Made the silly mistake of coming down and working in the Minister's offices as a senior policy officer for biosecurity and natural resource management, and today I still do biosecurity consultancy, but also with a organisation, a volunteer organisation, grassroots, called Property Rights Australia. We've been around for 20 years. And we've got rural and urban people, and we stand up for people's property rights when we're under threat. And I'm the chair, for a couple of years. And so we believe that if you own private property, you should have exclusive use, exclusive access, and dare I say, the ability to make a profit off your land. And so if we just skip through, so I won't go into about how fire ants, we all know basically how they got there. If we just skip that slide. The eradication strategy, as you know, it's promoted, the horseshoe strategy. There's been a few different maps over the last 23 years of the program of how it's been managed. As you know, this is the main one I really wanted to talk about, and it's a takeaway tonight. This is what they use for all, this is the basis of biosecurity and how they manage all pest species. So if you look at prevention over here, and that's why we've got strong borders, we should always try and keep things out. Having strong borders, keeping weeds out, keeping pests out, because that's where you get the best rate of return on your investment, because once they're in, it costs a lot of money. So that's where we should have stopped with fire ants, but of course they came in on containers. And this is the entry of pests. So once they get in here, we should jump on anything as soon as possible. Put all our resources into it, because being pests, any pest species in a new country, they haven't got as many natural, predators as in their home country, and they expand quickly. Look at all the weeds you have around here. They're spread throughout Australia. Look at all the pests that we've got in Australia. So it's the time to jump on them in this phase, in the eradication phase. And when they get past that, we jump into a containment phase, and we try and keep things from breaking out over that boundary. And then once we get up to the top of the invasion curve over time, we've got to learn to live with them. Look at all the naturalised weeds in Australia. Look at all the pests, the feral pigs. We live with them and we control them, and then we suppress them. So there's different levels, there's different management aspects at each prevention, eradication, containment asset base. So where do people think the fire ant infestation is at this moment? What section out of the four? Asset base to some? Yep. Anyone else want to comment?
Containment.
So I think it's in somewhere in containment, on its way for moving out into asset protection. But the government keeps thinking that it's in eradication. We will never eradicate fire ants. After 23 years, no. Maybe when they first arrived, they were told they were never going to eradicate 38,000 hectares. It was a no-no. They were told to all contain them. And remember, the thing about containment, it's forever. Containment is forever. And you'll see how, because they're basically running a containment program now, they're not going to admit it. They can't even contain, because every now and then we'll look at Oakey, look at Highfields, look at Sunshine Coast, look at over the border, Wollumbar, Waddell. So that's called the goose effect in biosecurity science. No matter what you do, you'll always have a jump over your containment lines. Next slide, please. So the government current-led approach, they're heavy-handed. So and that's what you do in an eradication program. You've got to really jump on things quickly, but as we know, it's not really an eradication program. But that's the way they're acting. You've got to let me on your property. We're going to bait your property whether you like it or not. We've got the badge. We're coming with all the cops. We're going to push our way in. It's disengaging and leading to discontent and fear of reporting. People don't want to report they've got fire ants because you're going to have the cops around. A cost shifting to local government and the community. Local governments are now complaining because they're starting to pass over a lot of those costs for local government to treat their own land, but the state hangs on to the money. Most importantly, they're disrespecting people's property rights and individual differences. Don't you think after 23 years that they would have come up with some non-chemical means to control fire ants? And they're there. Trevor's just talked about them. They're there in the States. They should have a broad spectrum approach across, because there's cultural differences in all communities. Some people want to use chemicals, some want the non-chemical life, and that's what they should be looking at in their program. Slow response times, ad hoc response time. Can you just go back one, please? Lack of transparency. We've heard about it all today. Non-chemical control options available. Yep, thanks. So I'm here to talk about a different model, because tonight we've talked about what's wrong, what we're going to do, but this isn't going away, and we've got to lead from the front. And I've worked with a lot of different communities, and you've got to unite. And united community is a strong community, with government overreach and heavy-handed bureaucracy. So there are things called syndicates, community-led syndicates for the control of a number of pest species already. Some have been going for over 100 years, 110 years out west, controlling wild dogs, controlling foxes, controlling a heap of different types of pest species. They're actually funded by local governments to keep them ticking over, and the community is at the front. They're culturally sensitive. If people don't want to use chemical, they don't have to. They still have to meet their biosecurity obligation. We all should be. We've all got a role to protect our native fauna and fauna. Yep. This is what it is. This is a basic syndicate model. I thought I'd draw it for you. So we still have state government oversight resources that are provided to local government. We've still got, and state government still controls their own land. We've got a local community takes the lead for the management on private property. You should be able to manage your private property with fire ants and use non-chemical means. You've still got an obligation. You still meet the state's obligation, because they're not going to go away. They're the state. They've got obligations. But you should have the choice of treating your property non-chemically. You're still meeting your obligations under the Biosecurity Act. Down the bottom, you've got local government funding. Local government are the closest government to the people. Sure, they get a hard rap sometimes. They're not perfect, but they get a lot of responsibilities from the state with no money attached. But local government could get funding from the state to help set up syndicates, like it is to other parts of Queensland and around Australia. And you're still going to have management services by professionals who have built their own stuff, their own techniques to actually do like hot water treatment, stuff like that, or you can employ professional services. So this is a sweet spot in the middle, that blue bit. That is where real collaboration happens. And it must happen for fire ants into the future, because we are going to have to learn to live with this pest species. We are going to have to learn to constantly suppress it. Now, remember back to that invasion curve. Fire ants, like any other pest species, is when they build in density, like around Logan, like in a lot of places where there's been a lot of housing development, a lot of disturbed soil, you get a lot of fire ants. And they do cause problems with animals walking through, cattle walking through. I've talked to a number of producers when there's a lot of nests, when there's hundreds and hundreds of nests per acre, per hectare. But it's about suppressing that down, keeping that down, so they don't get up to that high number. But that's what a syndicate looks like. Yep. So they're dominated by community members. You're not just there speaking to a number of government johnnies. You've got community people on the syndicate working in their community, working out how they're going to manage fire ants. There's some support from state and local government in line with their biosecurity plan. State and local government still have responsible for the management of lands under their control. Yeah, the highways, the roads, the parks. Yep. Benefits, there's local knowledge utilisation. Community members often have detailed knowledge of the local environment. Increased participation and ownership. So you haven't got government banging on your door, but you know you've got to play your role. You don't have to use chemicals. The most successful programs is where you have a broad spectrum array of control options. That's what we've found and what I've experienced in my 30 years of biosecurity. Yep. Cost efficiency. Look how much money they are spending on aerial control, on advertising, on baits. Imagine how many tons of baits they've used in the last 23 years. I was only talking to Trevor about it. There'd be hundreds and hundreds, there could even be 1,000 tons. Who knows? There's a lot of baits. Coordinated effort, social cohering, so sharing resources like equipment and knowledge. Coordinated efforts, yep. So increased compliance. So if the government, if they went with a syndicate model, and it needs to be trialled, and this could be the community that could trial a syndicate model. We're saying we'll meet you halfway, let us do it our way. Let us treat it the way that's still effective, but we don't want aerial baits. If people want to bait using chemical baits, they'll have that option. But we need other options, and that's what Sarah and I and other people have been working on with other communities. Yep. It's adaptable and flexible, ecologically sound solutions. So community members are often motivated to use environmentally friendly and sustainable methods of pest control to protect local biodiversity. Remember land care groups, bush care groups? People get involved to protect their own environment, yeah? You get more ownership. This community feels like it's got ownership of the environment, what I've seen tonight. Yep. Knowledge sharing, capacity building. Improved monitoring and early detection. You might say, well, I've seen a couple of nests down the road there built. Let's treat them with hot water. Let's get Trev here. We'll get Trev here, and he goes around to a number of properties. Why he's here. That's how our syndicate works. You have a list of contractors on the books, and you might have a heap of people doing environmentally friendly methods, and you might have some other professional contractors doing chemical control methods. Yep. The benefits of a community syndicate model also, it's a grassroots up approach, not a top-down approach. Is everyone sick of the top-down approach from government in our lives? Yeah. Government wants to even make lunch for our kids. They want to own service stations. Get out of our lives, mate. Do the basics right and let us manage the issues with the community. That's what works, and that's what has worked in the past when communities take control. It respects individual differences and it respects your damn property rights. You should have control of what is put on your own property. No one's arguing that we don't agree with biosecurity to keep pests out, to treat things quickly, to control weeds. Yep. There are some challenges. Political leadership to adopt a more collaborative, community-driven model rather than an authoritarian approach, because look how government's grown. Look at the size of it, and it keeps growing. It keeps invading every aspect of our lives. We need them to step away and have a go at this model. And government's got to give up a bit of money to local government and communities for this, because at the moment they're just hogging it. Why wouldn't they? They only pay for 10%, Queensland, the rest they get from the states and the feds. The feds put in 50%. Acceptance by the authorities that the program is no longer an eradication.
That's number
they
one.
live with containment, but it is no longer eradication. They keep using the word, they keep dropping it everywhere. Eradication, people go, yeah, we're going to eradicate it. Oh, it just sounds good. You know, the politicians go, well, when we get in, Chris Philly said, we're going to do a review and we're going to really get on with it and eradicate it. Do you want to have this forced on your community for the next 20 years? Well, we need to flip it. We need to do things differently. And we need to show some leadership, some political leadership, some community leadership saying, hey, we want to be treated differently. Why don't we look at a different model here? Because we're going to have to in the future years ahead. We've got to get ready to live with fire ants. Yep. That's all I've got for you. It's been a long night. Thank you very much.